Well, it used to be a newsroom rule: don't report bomb threats. That, of course, was a very different world before heightened security over terror attacks and mass shootings became a fact of life. But is reporting security alerts keeping us informed or just freaking us out? It's a pleasant December day. And then
an explosive situation in downtown Boston.
A frightening scene right there.
The local networks were wall to wall with live coverage of last week's police response to a random suitcase left near a Homeland Security official.
Bomb squad safely detonated the bag.
It's one thing for the police to respond, but what about the breathless coverage when the outcome is predictable?
And now it seems it was all a hoax.
Of course it was. But even insignificant incidents these days are news.
A person aboard an MBTA bus spilled a suspicious substance inside. Field tests showed the liquid was water.
And then there's the school threats.
Breaking news in Cambridge, extra security measures being put in place. Police and dogs posted at each of the schools, even hazmat trucks in the drop-off line.
A series of crude online threats directed at Cambridge public schools had the city on alert and parents on edge. For little reason.
Investigators do believe a student is behind the threats. The initial posted message complained of too much homework.
Now comes the next scare. Will the new Star Wars film attract gunmen to packed theaters?
Being in a big crowd of people in costumes is something many people will think about twice.
Talk about being on the dark side. Even the runaway train, the red line from yesterday, got sort of a breathless treatment. It was like that something was tampered with. There was a suggestion right from the get-go that it was terrorism, although it always sounded to me like some, goofy operator error. But, back in the days, Callie, I'm sure you remember when you never reported a bomb threat. You can't do that anymore largely because of, social media. They're out there with it, and somehow we would be complicit by not, the mainstream media doesn't think it's important. But let me tell you, I know what's going on here. And you foment a whole different kind of fear if you don't report it.
Well, then there's also the possibility that it is something, because now we're also in an age of serious copycats. So that's what concerns me, frankly, is not even the first folks who are actually doing the horrible deed, but the second and third wave of them who think, oh, I can do this too. And you just don't know. I think it's the level of reporting that can be examined. I don't think we're at a point where you cannot report it, but I think you can take a good long look at how you're going to report it, and if there's going to be a series of events, realize everything to your word cannot be breathless. That's just not going to work. The other part of this is, the word is for people to be vigilant. Okay, well, what does that mean?
I know, it's crazy.
People are being vigilant and reporting what they see, and here we are.
It makes me think of what's happening in the schools, where now you have these lockdown drills and you have these multiple layers of security, and you know that statistically things are unlikely to happen, but you also think, well, if it did happen and you didn't have this. So that's the bind that I think news editors are in, is, how do you account for what would happen if it were real? The other thing is that just sort of reminds me of, what was the story a few years ago about Aqua Teen Hunger Force?
Oh my gosh.
The guerrilla marketing, and they had the lights and everyone thought it was a bomb
did
threat.
Not think that
was
funny.
Days long, so at least these stories are going by a little faster.
Yeah. Well, that was days long because we made asses of ourselves here in Boston, right? I would love to see when something like San Bernardino happens, for example, or take another, mass shooting that is not connected to international terrorism, but is simply the product maybe of a crazed lone gunman. I'd love to see a little pullback on the follow-ups, where the next day and the day after that, all of us, including us here at WGBH, are going out looking for the local connection, which makes the fear of that horrible event as palpable here as it was across the country. I think it's really hard for newsrooms to do that because the impulse is always localized, follow up. But I do think that jacks up the sort of baseline level of anxiety. If I said in one of our morning meetings, I don't think we really need to follow this today, or maybe we can do, 1 or 2 stories instead of 5 or 7, I think people would look at me like I was a freak. But I think we should think about it, especially because of that copycat effect that Callie was talking. I think you were talking about it.
Yes.
Because I think that might feed into it.
We're in the midst of a national freakout, and it's hard to figure out why. The New York Times did a poll this week that showed that people are more worried about terrorism than at any point since 9/11. And when you look back at what's happened over the years, we've had mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. If it's Islamic terrorism that we're especially worried about, We had the Boston Marathon bombings, and people seem to hold it together pretty well. I mean, remember Boston Strong? Well, in this case, we seem to be having America terrified, and I'm really not sure why, except that I think it's related to
Donald Trump?
To Donald Trump and the presidential campaign.
Well, I think the cause and effect is the opposite. I think part of the reason you're seeing this unthinkable support for Donald Trump is that people are freaked out.
But why? Why, when we've had so many incidents over the years and we were able to keep our heads?
The same number.
We've had 200,000 deaths by guns since 9/11, and we've had about 90 mass shootings, 90 victims of mass shootings, terrorism attacks, whatever you want to call them, about evenly divided between Islamic terrorists and homegrown terrorists. And yet, all of a sudden, this has become the #1 issue. And a few weeks ago, it wasn't.
Well, that's because we're hearing a lot about it, and people. So you got a few things going on, playing on people's fears. Then you got, let's go back to those straight journalists. I mean, I think that would freak me out if I'm watching regular news and all of a sudden I see the guy that normally is just giving me the straight facts and he's saying, wait a minute, this guy, watch out for him. I mean, I think that ramps up.
But San Bernardino did happen. It was recent, and it felt random enough that it could happen to anyone. That felt just, this wasn't in a neighborhood that you're never in. This was something that could happen.
Well, in fact, it all feels random because the fears about Star Wars, I said, what are people? Then I said, oh yeah, going into the movie theater.
That's a great way to give someone an idea, too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.